They say the quietest moments can carry the loudest secrets, and I never truly understood that until that night. It was just me, alone in the room, lost in my thoughts, or so I thought. Then, everything changed. I'd always trusted my husband's friends. They'd been in his life far longer than I had, almost like family. So when he suggested that his friend Ethan stay with us for a while, I didn't think much of it. Ethan was charming, polite, and always seemed to be the life of any gathering. But there was something about him that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Something that made me feel noticed. It started subtly. A lingering glance here, a comment that seemed just a bit too personal there. At first, I dismissed it as harmless, a figment of my imagination, perhaps. After all, I was a married woman, and Ethan was my husband's best friend. There was no reason to suspect anything inappropriate. But as the days turned into weeks, the air between us grew heavier, charged with an unspoken tension neither of us dared acknowledge. That night, my husband was working late. I'd been feeling restless all evening, unable to focus on anything. Ethan had been out most of the day, and the house was unusually quiet. I'd retreated to the bedroom, seeking solace in the pages of a book. But the stillness was soon broken by the sound of footsteps approaching the door. I looked up just as Ethan appeared in the doorway. He leaned against the frame, his eyes locking onto mine in a way that made my breath hitch. "Am I interrupting?" he asked, his voice low and smooth. I shook my head, trying to steady my racing heart. "No, not at all," I replied, my voice betraying a nervousness I couldn't explain. He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. The action was casual, yet it sent a ripple of unease through me. "You seem distracted lately," he said, his tone laced with concern. "Is everything okay?" I nodded quickly, too quickly, and forced a smile. "I'm fine. Just a lot on my mind, I guess." Ethan took a seat on the edge of the bed, his presence suddenly overwhelming. "You know," he began, his gaze never leaving mine, "if there's ever anything you want to talk about, I'm here." His words were innocent enough, but the way he said them felt anything but. I could feel the walls closing in, the air thick with an electricity I didn't know how to diffuse. "Thank you," I murmured, lowering my eyes to avoid his piercing stare, but Ethan wasn't done. He reached out, his fingers brushing against mine. The contact was brief, but it sent a jolt through me that I couldn't ignore. "You deserve to be happy," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. I should have stopped him. I should have said something, done something to put an end to whatever was happening between us. But I didn't. Instead, I found myself caught in a whirlwind of emotions I couldn't untangle. Confusion, guilt, and something else, something that scared me. Ethan leaned closer, his face inches from mine. "Do you ever feel like you're not being seen?" he asked, his tone both gentle and probing. The question caught me off guard, striking a chord I hadn't realized existed. I swallowed hard, my mind racing. "Ethan, I don't think—" I began, but my voice faltered. "It's okay," he said, his hand now resting lightly on my shoulder. "I get it. Sometimes life, relationships, they get complicated." His words felt like a lifeline, offering understanding in a way I hadn't experienced before. But they also felt like a trap, luring me into something I knew I couldn't allow. As the seconds stretched into eternity, I realized I was standing on the edge of a precipice. One wrong move, and everything I'd built with my husband would come crashing down. My heart pounded in my chest as I finally found the strength to pull away. "Ethan, we can't," I said firmly, my voice trembling. "This isn't right." He nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "I know," he said, standing and taking a step back. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." But the damage was already done. The line we'd crossed could never be uncrossed, and the weight of that realization pressed down on me like a ton of bricks. For the rest of the night, I couldn't shake the memory of Ethan's touch, his words, his gaze. Guilt gnawed at me, but so did something else, a longing I couldn't admit, even to myself. And as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again.